Hello and welcome everyone to today's webinar, 5 Signs You May Be Outgrowing Your MySQL Data Warehouse. My name is Jeff Healy. I head up product marketing for HP Vertica, and I'm very pleased to have 3 presenters with us today. We've got a great presentation I'm sure that you're all going to enjoy. I'm joined here by Allison Reynolds, who's one of our lead sales engineers for HP Vertica, who's going to cover the top 5 signs and share some of her experiences from the field. Jason Kirk, Vice President of Product Development for CC Bill, one of our respected customers, who's going to explain how they migrated from their MySQL Data Warehouse to Vertica and the challenges they were able to overcome and some of the results that they've experienced. Finally, we'll be joined by Roger Nessier, VP of Client Management for Estuate, and Roger is going to explain how his organization can help you through a set of services and methodologies, helping you to easily migrate from MySQL to HP Vertica. All right, so some quick logistics before we get started. The call will be recorded, the webinar will be, and will be made available through a replay link likely next week, next Monday. So I'd appreciate it if everyone shares that with your colleagues, or if you weren't able to join, you'll be able to see that and review it. Okay, so just I've got 2 slides I'm going to cover. The first one is talk a little bit about our customers. So we've got hundreds of customers across multiple industries, from healthcare to online gaming, financial services, retail, and you name it. What we've been seeing is a lot of analytics use cases emerging. And, as this market matures, and naturally big data is a very, very hot market right now, companies are looking for an analytics platform to get really fast results from mountains of data. And we're very pleased to have CC Bill as one of the customers that's going to explain their analytics initiatives. But these cut across from clickstream analytics to claims analyses to even sensor data being used for different types of use cases like predictive maintenance, predictive analytics. So I'd encourage everyone to go to our site and check out some of the case studies. We're going to be doing more and more webinars and featuring our customer successes. Okay, and one more slide I want to cover is that we'll have announcements on a regular basis. And one we had around HP Discover in December was our HP App System for Vertica. And that just became available yesterday, so I wanted to alert everyone on the call. HP App System for Vertica is essentially a reference architecture. So if you want to get to market even faster at a lower total cost of ownership, you can use HP Vertica 6.1 with the HP ProLiant DL380P Gen 8s, the leaders in data center standard. So if you have an initiative coming up and you want this combination of technologies and you get more tighter integration through HP, I'd encourage you to get more information on this product. We've got a variety of sales tools and information on hp.com, and we will have further information in webinars and webcasts and the like. But I know we have a lot of content to cover today, so hopefully I didn't rush too much. But I want to pass it off now to Allison Reynolds so that we'll have time at the end of the call to answer your questions. We're going to leave about 10 minutes. But Allison, why don't you take it away from here?
Okay, thanks, Jeff. As Jeff mentioned, I'm a systems engineer at Vertica. I've worked with a lot of customers over the last several years, and many of them have migrated from MySQL to Vertica. So what I was going to cover in the next few minutes was some of the challenges that we see our customers who have been using MySQL in the past facing as they try to analyze more and more data on that platform, and how Vertica can help. And then I'll be turning it over to one of our customers who has, CC Bill, who has migrated from MySQL to Vertica, and one of our partners who can help with the migration as well. So on this slide, I'm highlighting some of the challenges that people face with MySQL and kind of know when it's reaching its limits for analytics. MySQL was really designed for transaction processing. So trying to do analytics and BI workloads on it, it reaches limits, and those limits can be anywhere between tens of gigabytes up to maybe a few terabytes. And so the first 2 signs here really go hand in hand, files getting too large and considering implementing partitioning or sharding. And this is probably, using partitioning or sharding is probably one of the most common workarounds that we would see customers use when they're trying to really stretch MySQL to its limits. So what it is if MySQL can handle, a table that's 10 gigabytes in size or whatever it is, before performance really starts to fall off. When data sets get larger, what we see a lot of people doing is breaking up their data and making many smaller tables instead of one big table. And the most common way to do this is date-based, maybe a table per day. Of course, this adds a lot of complexity to the application. Not only are there a lot more tables to manage, but also you need something at the application layer that's smart enough to know, I can't just query one table. I've got to know which tables to go against and be able to merge multiple result sets back together. So it adds a lot of complexity. It can stretch MySQL a bit further, but it really doesn't make sense. You're making a lot of application-level changes that are really, trying to fit MySQL, a transaction database, into the analytics space. Another challenge or sign that we see among our customers is people who find that they're needing to index the database more and more. And this can be challenging on a couple of fronts. First, of course, indices consume space. Indices shouldn't be taking up more space on disk than the data itself. And it means that you can't do as much with the same hardware platform. In addition, indices, of course, need to be maintained. So if you're trying to load into a table and then also keep any number of indices up to date for query performance, what falls off is the latency of load. So if you're in an industry like networking or online, where you've got click data or many other use cases where you really want to be able to see time to value and analyze the data as soon as it's available, having to use structures like indices to get query performance really prevents you from also getting the near real-time analytics. Going along with that, what we're seeing in this era of big data is that many people want to track more and more metrics, and what that translates to is wider tables. And wider tables for a traditional row-oriented database like MySQL are a challenge because most analytic queries only touch a couple columns, even if a table is quite wide. And in a system like MySQL, your only options are either to read all of the data off disk, even if you end up discarding most of the columns before you get query results back, or to add indices, both of which are expensive options. And finally, maxing out your servers. Obviously, this could be disk space or just that current hardware can no longer get answers back fast enough. So with that, I'll do a quick introduction to the Vertica database. And basically, the Vertica database was designed around 2005 by Mike Stonebreaker, who built Postgres about 30 years ago. And he looked at the database market and said, really all of the systems that are out there are designed for transaction processing. And you can design a system that still looks from the outside like any other database. It's relational. It uses SQL as its primary interface. But on disk, have the data organized really differently to be able to service analytic and BI queries much more efficiently. So the two main characteristics of Vertica in the storage format that make it better for analytic queries are the use of the column-oriented architecture and the use of encoding and compression. So in Vertica, as I mentioned, you'll have tables like any other database, and from the query side, it's the same. But on disk, it's column-oriented, and what that means is that the data for each column is stored in physically separate files on disk. So in the example of having a wide table where you're only accessing a subset of the columns, Vertica can actually only read the columns that are used in the query from disk. On top of that, Vertica heavily encodes and compresses the data. And this is good not just to reduce the physical footprint, and allow you to fit more data in the same amount of disk space, but it can also execute queries on the encoded data. So it's not just more efficient about what data is being pulled off disk, but also what it's processing on. If we're processing on encoded data, there's less data that needs to be churned through the CPUs and through memory. So the premise of Vertica between the column orientation and the compression is really, rather than just laying the data down in a row-oriented format and then building auxiliary structures like indexes to optimize for performance, the idea is really to lay it down the first time in a format that's highly optimized for query. On top of that, Vertica is really designed to scale out very effectively. So you can start on a single server, and many of our customers do. You can also scale out very effectively by adding additional servers to a Vertica cluster. And these are typically just x86 Linux servers. So we've got many customers, many MySQL customers that start on Vertica with as small as tens of gigabytes, and on the large side, we've got about a dozen customers at this point that are running with over a petabyte in Vertica on up to a couple hundred servers. It's also important at any scale to have a low administration database, and so for clusters of servers, there's high availability built into Vertica's database architecture. Vertica will automatically distribute the data between the servers in a cluster. And we also have a tool called the Database Designer that can help optimize the physical storage. So it can do things like figure out which is the best encoding type for a particular column. So all of those things are really designed to make Vertica very easy to administer, to scale. And the idea is that the application can stay the same and you benefit from much better performance as opposed to having to make a lot of application and manual changes like sharding to get the same performance. On top of that, Vertica does offer a lot of advanced analytics and predictive analytics capabilities. That's not the focus of the webinar today, but for customers who are starting with SQL-based analytics but want the option to go become more predictive or look at sentiment data or do a lot of additional analytics in the future, Vertica can be a great platform for that as well. So on the next slide, I wanted to cover a couple common questions that we get specifically from customers that are on MySQL now and considering Vertica. And the first is really about how much data do I need? When does it make sense to move from MySQL to Vertica? And I think a lot of this is that, Vertica is kind of positioned as a big data database. And so big data often means tens or hundreds of terabytes or petabytes. But in fact, when it makes sense to move really just depends when you're hitting limits on your current system. And so with MySQL, we find, sometimes that's tens of gigabytes, sometimes it's hundreds of gigabytes, sometimes it's a couple terabytes. And we've had customers come to us at any of those scales who said, I've got dashboards that really need to be interactive, and it's taking a couple minutes for my queries to return. And a couple minutes isn't interactive. So even at a smaller scale, moving over to Vertica, they can improve the efficiency of their query execution and be able to service those query requests in seconds, not minutes. A next question is often around migration effort, and I think I've touched on this a bit already. But from the outside, Vertica will look like MySQL. It's SQL-based. It's got ODBC and JDBC drivers. It can connect to most off-the-shelf BI and ETL tools, as well as custom applications. So putting an application on top of Vertica tends to be a pretty simple process. And then when it comes to optimizing, we do have the Database Designer tool that can manage that for you. There's, of course, a range here. We do have customers, actually a couple of the case studies I'll mention later are customers who've migrated their whole application from MySQL to Vertica in a matter of just a couple of weeks or under a month. Vertica has an Amazon machine instance, which makes it very easy to test it out even in the cloud. You can spin up an Amazon instance that's already pre-configured for Vertica and try it out there. On kind of the other end of the spectrum, we've had customers that really have put in a lot of work to take MySQL and take it as far as they can. And actually, our partner, Estuate, will talk about this in a few minutes. They worked with one of our customers that had done a lot of work, highly optimized their MySQL environment, and so the migration was a bit more work. But we've got a great partner in Estuate that can help with that process. And finally, one of the things that we see frequently is customers that are on MySQL can see that they've got a few big tables, and that's really where their performance challenges are. But they also have a lot of smaller tables, maybe metadata, that needs to be deleted and updated, and it actually has more of a transactional workload. And so a common question is whether they need both Vertica for analytics and to keep MySQL for that metadata. And the answer is usually no. We do have a lot of customers who have hundreds or even thousands of metadata tables in Vertica, and actually handling small transactional workloads on those is fine. You're not going to get, tens of thousands of transactions per second, but at a small scale, if you're trying to manage user data or configuration information, almost always that information can be managed by Vertica as well. On the next slide, I wanted to touch a little bit on Vertica's OEM program. This is where I've actually spent a lot of my personal time at Vertica, is working with customers in our OEM program. And you can see on this slide two examples of customers, Empirix and Logmatrix. These are OEM partners of ours, and both of them migrated from MySQL to Vertica. And you can read more about their experiences and migration process on these case studies on the website. OEM for us means that these companies are packaging Vertica with their own application and then deploying their application on their customer's premise. And Vertica is good for OEM for a lot of the same reasons we've been talking about already. But for OEM in particular, there's a couple other challenges. One thing that's very common is that our OEM partners might have hundreds of customers of their own. 90% of them might be able to get what they need from the current infrastructure, but they've got a small percent that's really pushing the limits of what they can do, getting to larger data sizes or faster ingest rates, et cetera. So what they like about Vertica is that Vertica really has the flexibility. You can have 90% of your customers on a single node, single server deployment, but also handles the subset of customers that are going to run with tens or hundreds of terabytes. And it really opens up new business opportunities for them while enabling them to keep their platform simple. They can support only Vertica for all of their range of customers. And finally, this is kind of a summary, mapping back Vertica's capabilities to some of the challenges with MySQL. And what it really comes down to is just taking a tool in Vertica that was designed from the ground up for analytics. It means that it's going to be much more efficient, with hardware utilization, with the amount of data that you can fit in the same space. And it can give you that value of getting more out of your current hardware and more out of your application at small scale, but also future-proof your business to be able to handle much larger data sets or much more complex analytics in the future. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Jeff.
Great. Thanks, Allison. Great information. I'm sure a lot of people got great information around the 5 signs that they can now identify with. Jason, why don't we pass it off to you now, and you can talk a little bit about CC Bill and how you migrated from MySQL to Vertica.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jeff. My name is Jason Kirk. I'm VP of CC Bill. Give me a moment to figure out how to advance the slides here. There we go. I want to start off by talking a little bit about our company background. So CC Bill is a payment processing company. We have a lot of different users that consume our data and have different reasons for looking at our data. So first of all, our first user are our consumers. They purchase end products. And then we have our clients who actually produce and sell those end products to the consumers. So they will have like websites, usually digital goods. And then we have our affiliates who help drive the consumers to the clients. And then, of course, we have our staff members, and they support all 3 types of the above users. So what our company does is we're actually a turnkey solution for subscription-based websites. We offer a full package of payment processing needs. So essentially, you can do your business of producing, your content or producing your services and having them on the web, but we take care of actually managing the relationship with the customer and handling, recurring subscriptions and refunds and support and all that stuff. So with that being said, we have payment forms where the consumers come to the system and, purchase your product. We have an affiliate system where affiliates can choose to send traffic and sales to your website to help you grow your business. And then we have consumer support. So if anyone has an issue with one of their payments, or they're having a problem accessing your website, they can actually call us 24/7, 365, and get support on their subscription. We offer payouts for both our clients and our affiliates. We take care of getting our clients and affiliates the money that they make, and then we have reporting. And kind of like reporting is where Vertica comes in. We've been really strong in our company with the first 4 bullet points there, but we've been lacking on reporting because of the restrictions in MySQL, and that's kind of what we'll go over next. So using MySQL has been really great for us. We have it deployed for our transaction systems and our reporting systems. For our transaction systems, MySQL works great. It's a transaction processing database. It allows us to do high-volume transaction processing on primary keys. There's an abundance of support integration options, so no matter what framework we use, no matter what development language we use, we know we have support for MySQL. And it's an open source product, but it's got higher than normal quality than most other open source projects. We've never had to mess around with the source code of MySQL, and it's been a very stable platform for us. Now, with reporting systems, that's kind of where MySQL doesn't really, work for us very well. So we have extremely long query times because the amount of data that we have in our systems. Oftentimes reports would time out for our clients, especially the larger clients, with multiple transactions that they're trying to run a year. It's very possible, with MySQL that they would not get those results back. And that was, causing a support issue for our clients and our affiliates. We would always have to basically review and improve indexes and do a lot of tweaking on the MySQL side to sort of keep it up and running. And OLTP data structures in general just aren't the best for reporting. There should be, a different type of schema that's used for reporting. Data is also spread across multiple physical database clusters. So what that means is, CCBuild has a lot of different products, and those products use different databases, and sometimes when you're trying to build dashboards and reporting and stuff like that, you'd have to get information from multiple sources and combine them into one, and that caused, those reports to take a lot longer to load because you have to go to multiple places to get that data. So next, we're going to talk about our decision to choose Vertica, and really, this wasn't a project we went into, saying like, let's look at getting a big data vendor. It was more like, let's solve the reporting problem. So the solutions we evaluated first were report engine solutions, and that was simply, getting a reporting engine that supported the functionality that we need, that we could put on top of our existing databases. And we looked at a couple products for that, iNetSoft, Style Intelligence, and Logi Analytics, amongst some others. And what we found out that really, although these reporting engines had a lot of good features, it really didn't increase the capability of MySQL to return good results as far as query processing time. So then we started looking into the data warehouse solutions, and we looked at several there. Netezza was one of them, and then we also looked into MySQL complementary solutions, InfiniDB and InfoBright, and then of course we looked into Vertica. Now, Netezza is a type of appliance, so it's not run on commodity hardware. So really there's a huge capital expenditure that you have to do up front there, so it didn't really work out well for us in that respect. And then the MySQL complementary solutions seemed like a good idea on the surface because you're basically connecting to these products like through a MySQL interface, so anything that supports MySQL would support these two databases. And the compliance for SQL and the actual performance that we got out of these products wasn't sufficient enough. So that's why those didn't work out. And then we looked into Vertica, and we did an exhaustive report on kind of Vertica's performance, and we determined that we love Vertica. What we love about Vertica is that it can be run on commodity hardware. So, like Allison was talking about, you can start off with one node, and you can scale to multiple nodes, in the future. And the scaling is easy because you just add a node into the cluster, and it redistributes the data on the fly. The speed is very, very impressive, and I'll get into some numbers later. But we've just always been, kind of wowed by the performance that Vertica provides us. Great SQL compliance, really. The SQL is up there with Oracle, MySQL, Postgres. Everything that we need to do in SQL, we can do it in Vertica. The documentation is stellar. They have about 6 documents on the product, PDF files, sorted by kind of what role that you are playing in the development of Vertica, and all of that documentation is great. And then unlimited number of clusters. So the way Vertica licensing works is you purchase a number of, a data size license. So 5 terabytes, 2 petabytes, that's the price you pay. But you can actually run any number of clusters, any number of nodes in those clusters, and as long as it fits within that constraint. So considerations for Vertica deployment. We've had a lot of experience with Vertica, and we've done a lot of different things with Vertica. And this is kind of like my recommendations for Vertica deployment. So cloud deployment is great. There's the flexibility and speed of adding additional nodes. You can run it on Amazon Cloud. You can run it on Phoenix Snap Cloud. You can set up your own vCenter VMware cloud internally and run it on there. But what we found is if you're doing cloud deployments, kind of watch out for shared storage. If there's a problem with shared storage, that could cause issues with your Vertica deployment. You can set up redundancy on the cluster, but what we prefer is kind of have segregated storage per VM, and that works out best. Next I talk about active and standby production clusters. This is something that we're doing in CCBuild now, where we actually run 2 clusters at the same time. One of them is active and one of them is standby. And the reason that we do this is Vertica is really good at enhancing their product and releasing new versions. Every time they release a new product, there's more features added, the speed is improved, and everything like that. But it happens pretty often where, every time that we have to do it, we would have to take down, the production cluster reports would be unavailable for that period of time while we're doing the upgrade. And that's just something that, we don't really want to put our clients through, having a period of downtime. So it's really suggested that you just kind of have 2 production clusters so that you can switch back and forth to handle those upgrades. And then query processing speed. Essentially with Vertica, you have to remember that you can run queries over millions and millions of rows of data, and you'll get that information really quickly. Kind of in our reporting system, we had to do several queries to get our data. So kind of switching over to that in Vertica isn't really the recommended way to go. It's more, create your data structure so that you can run the least amount of queries to get your report as possible, and you'll be giving the end user a lot more performance on the front end. All right, so I'm going to go into the results here that we've seen in Vertica so far. I'm going to talk about our legacy reporting system first, and that's essentially the reporting system that we have available to our clients right now. The first thing that we did with Vertica, obviously, is we migrated the data over, started using it internally, and then we changed our legacy reporting system to use Vertica. And basically, we're replicating directly the data from our MySQL servers to Vertica using a product called Tungsten Replicator, and it's an open source and commercial product available on the internet. Great product. Basically, all the inserts we do, all new data we do using the bulk copy functionality built into Vertica. Copying is extremely fast in Vertica. It's 2 times faster than the closest big data competitor, and it's 7 times faster than the average big data competitor that we were researching. And it's just night and day comparison between MySQL and Vertica. And then deletes and updates. So deletes and updates in any big data solution is not going to be as fast in MySQL because MySQL is very good at doing that as an OLTP database solution. So with deletes and updates, we implemented a slowly changing dynamic dimension concept where we essentially keep track of the data that's changed, and once every 30 minutes we do a bulk update on that information so that we don't have delays as far as performance issues when updating that data. So that's a very good concept to use when loading your data into the system. We've had huge successes in regards to report completion. Essentially, if you run a report now, you can run it for 10 years, and it's not going to time out. It's going to finish relatively quickly. Significantly accelerated reports for large time frames, 100 to 200 times faster than MySQL, 2 to 15 times faster than the competitors that we looked into. And then as far as reports for smaller time frames, those are negligible and possibly worse time frames for real small time frames. So that's like running one day on the report. But the reason for this is not a limitation in Vertica. It's simply because we took the data structure of our legacy transaction reports and migrated them directly to Vertica to save time, essentially, so we didn't have to build out a new data structure to begin with. So that's the only reason why it was slow. It's not Vertica's issue. All right, and then we talk about internal reporting. So our intelligence operations have been vastly reduced since we've got all of our data in Vertica. What this means is there's less custom development time and more data mining capabilities, which equals less net time due to query speed and flexibility. So what this means is, whenever we needed to get some type of report, we would have to have a developer, take a day to write a script, to extract the information from multiple sources in the MySQL databases, collate it all into a file, run it overnight because it would take a long time to actually extract all that data with hundreds of millions of records, and then come in the next day, analyze the report, and realize that there was one thing wrong. The developer would have to change it, run it again overnight, and then we review it. So, those types of requests could take, 1 to several days. Now, with Vertica, we just go in, we run the query, we get the result in about 10 seconds, put it into Excel, and then we can analyze the data. And so we're getting answers in, about 10 or 15 minutes, whereas it used to be taking us days. So we also have more data analyzed. The way that Vertica stores the data in its columnar storage is great. It saves a lot of data. It compresses the data a lot on the actual servers themselves, and we can keep more data, and it takes up less room. Archived data that we've had has been added to the warehouse. We've gone back through and added data that we had to archive back to the warehouse so we have longer reporting time frames. And we don't throw away any non-critical data anymore. So at this point, we can just kind of keep everything and keep it in Vertica for whatever uses that we can think of in the future. All right, so kind of moving forward, what we're working on, and this is actually active development on our side, hasn't been released to clients yet, so that's why we're kind of calling it future. We're building a report framework built on open standards. So we're using Grails, essentially, a data layer using Grails, which is the GORM framework that's kind of based off of Hibernate. The framework's backed by Vertica, and we're letting the database do all the processing, essentially. So we're creating RESTful web service layer in Grails that essentially uses the data layer to get all of the information from Vertica, but Vertica does all the processing of the data, grouping it, ordering it, and then returning it. Does it very quickly. This type of setup will also allow for our API that we're using to be consumed by third-party development companies to provide reports for our mutual clients. And then on the visualization layer that we're working on, we're using HighCharts and Google Charts API, and that just simply accesses the web service layer. So it's a very simple framework that we've come up with, the most simple that we've come up with in the past, so it'll be easy to expand upon that functionality. And it's all using open standards. And then we also have the data warehousing and ETL solutions. So this is kind of where we take our data warehouse to the next stage. So like I said, we're kind of using the production data structure right now. This is where we're creating the star schema to design the optimal query performance possible. We're using Pentaho ETL to essentially take the data from our production databases and put it into the warehouse. And then historical data analysis becomes possible because of this, and query and reporting data across multiple transaction systems becomes easier and faster because it's all consolidated into the one data warehouse. And like I said, this reporting system is currently in active development, and Vertica continues to wow us every time we look at it. We find that the transaction reports that we're looking at and the traffic reports that we're looking at are even faster than we anticipated them being in the first place. So, nothing but good things to say about Vertica for us. We're really excited about it. We're really excited to get this new reporting system out to our clients just as soon as we can. And that's about all I have. So thanks, everyone, for your time, and I'll send it back to Jeff.
Jason, thanks so much. Great way to tell how Vertica is changing your data analytics initiatives and as far as the challenges you've been able to overcome. Thanks for sharing that. Okay, now we're going to conclude it with our last presenter, last but certainly not least, Roger Nessier from Estuate. I'll pass out to Roger, then we'll get to the Q&A. Roger, why don't you take it away?
Hi, everyone. Roger Nessier here with Estuate. I manage our clients at Estuate, and Estuate is a certified HP Vertica partner worldwide. I'll just move to the next slide here. We have a team of trained, certified experts that have worked in big data, that have integrated structured and unstructured data, have done modeling of data, architecting of databases, performance tuning, and data security. So we have the full gamut of capabilities to be able to support any Vertica implementation. What we're going to talk about today is a case study. Unfortunately, I can't divulge the name of the client. We signed an NDA with them, but they are very big in the advertising space, and the project was centered around impression analytics. And for those of you not familiar with advertising, impression analytics is all about understanding a target audience, understanding the number of impressions that an ad makes, determining ad value, understanding the audience, understanding what the value of that ad is for the audience, and being able to justify ad prices and justify business value that companies spend placing ads on the web. For that, it's very important to have ad hoc business intelligence reports, very fast reports, and being able to quickly come up with various ad scenarios to come up with strategies around digital advertising. We're dealing with a huge amount of data here, so this is not your typical database. This is a 30-terabyte database, a very complex database, and likewise, this would not be your typical migration case study. Most migrations would ordinarily maybe take a week or two or maybe three, but this one actually took a lot longer just because of the size and complexity of the work. We used Informatica as an ETL tool, but you could use other ETL products, commercial, or you could use scripts. We felt, just because of our experience with Informatica, that was a good tool, and the customer concurred with that decision. And then they selected ClickView, and ClickView actually has a very good mating with the Vertica product in terms of being able to extract information quickly on the fly. Some of the technical issues that the client was encountering were dashboard updates being very slow, real-time analytics not being real, and they would make BI queries and walk away and then come back and couldn't even remember why they had made the query in the first place. So they ended up having to either redo the query or try to remember why they made the query. So there were a lot of issues with MySQL. The end result was that the client got much faster dashboard updates, improved reporting, and were able to make much faster, improved business decisions. And this resulted in higher profitability around the engagements that they had with their clients. So the problem definition of this was, as I indicated on the last slide, the queries were slow. There was a skew in the MySQL cluster, so there were lags in results, and the skew in terms of uneven loading of the MySQL cluster. And the business impact was incomplete data, didn't understand that the data they had, very, very slow response times, and inability to scale as their volume kept growing and growing. So this customer needed a high-volume data warehouse for data analytics. That was the primary need here. And they viewed, after some very deep analysis of the various solutions on the market, we convinced them that Vertica was the solution to go with for this particular problem. If we look at the implementation approach, for those of you that have migrated from one database to another, you'll be very familiar with this slide. It's nothing out of the ordinary, going from the MySQL cluster, extracting the data, transforming and cleansing that data, again using Informatica, as well as some scripts that we developed, writing the data to CSV files, and then bulk loading the data. And in this case, we tried to break up the data into smaller chunks on the bulk load to reduce our risk, so that if, for example, during the bulk load there's a problem, we can limit it to a smaller bulk load rather than bulk load for a couple hours and then find that something didn't work properly. Looking at the implementation approach, it's very important to prepare MySQL so that things like the character set, the time zone, are set to default values, so you don't end up with an issue between MySQL and Vertica. So make sure that the settings on MySQL and the settings on Vertica are the same. Again, those of you that did database migrations will be familiar with this particular preparation. So as part of the migration preparation, we had to set up the environment. And the environment consists of setting up 20 nodes of HP Vertica cluster. And the size was determined based on guidance we got from HP for the volume of data and demands for high-volume processing. And we migrated from a 50-node MySQL cluster. We also had to set up the management console for all the nodes in the database. We were running Red Hat Linux on a 64-bit architecture. And the hardware that we used was Dell, but we could have just as easily used HP hardware. This particular client just had a preference for Dell. As part of the migration actions, we had to split some large tables to reduce the risk, as I mentioned before. But and we also, in order to, again, take a more conservative approach, instead of migrating directly to an enterprise data warehouse, we built an initial Vertica data mart, and using that exact subset, we long-term, we migrated to the data warehouse architecture over subsequent phasing, and doing that using more of a stepwise approach to doing the work. As we were doing the work, we constantly tested. So testing was part of the plan, and you'll see in the next slide we get into pre-migration testing. But as we were doing the work, we were taking BI samples for testing to ensure that we were on the right track. We also had a fallback plan. It was very important that there was no downtime during the whole migration process, or minimal downtime of an hour or two in off hours. So we had a fallback plan to roll back to MySQL in the event that there was any problem, but we didn't have to use that plan. As part of the pre-migration testing, we thought it was a good idea to define the testing strategy early in the process, so you know what you're targeting. For example, what are the top queries that you would be using, and what would you use that? What would you use for testing? What would be the BI queries or SQL queries that you would use for testing? Also, as it's important to ensure that data validity in the destination system, which is Vertica, check that data validity in the destination system using SQL queries and BI queries. So for example, if you're going to do a SQL query like a left outer join on the MySQL system, see what the result is on MySQL versus what it would be on Vertica, and to ensure that you're getting the same result in the source and the target. So coming back to this diagram, as I mentioned earlier, we did the loads, the CSV loads in smaller bytes, and that just gave us a better feel of that the work was progressing correctly. As part of the post-migration checks, we validated all the source, target columns, and data types. We validated the ports. We validated the connections. We started to cut over from the MySQL database over to the Vertica database with the BI tool, which is ClickView, and seeing how ClickView responded to the Vertica database and seeing if the responses were equivalent by performing sanity tests on typical BI queries and troubleshooting in case there's any particular issues against those queries. We compared the records generated by the source system against the destination system. We as I said, we conducted the test to ensure that the field mappings created the expected results at the destination. So finally, the outcome of this exercise, of this migration exercise, was we were able to exceed actually the SLAs that our client expected in terms of BI query response time. We were able to complete the project on time and within budget. The ClickView integration into Vertica was very successful. Some of the challenges that we had with the entire project were we had some initial hardware-based performance issues, but we were able to address those using resource pools and optimizing some joins for some queries. And in terms of lesson learned, we found that we underestimated the amount of testing that we would need to do. We find that in this type of activity, with the amount of data that we're doing, you can't under-test. So it's very important to test thoroughly and test often, and to do continual testing throughout the process to make sure you're on the right track, and to also have the extra disk space available in the development and testing stages so that you can run those tests. And that covers it. Thank you.
Roger, thank you very much, and thank you, Jason and Allison, as well. We've got a few questions coming in. We've got about 10 minutes for that. We've got 2 or 3. So anyone on the line who wants to ask a question, please submit it through the question manager, and then we'll cover them here. Before we do, just want to give a quick wrap up about HP Vertica. Anyone who's interested out there, all you MySQL shops, if you're anticipating any types of challenges with your data analytics initiative, we encourage you to visit www.vertica.com. You can sign up for a free 30-day evaluation, or our Community Edition, which is a free download. We can store up to a terabyte of data across 3 nodes. And then finally, we have quite a comprehensive library of content up there, including the white paper based on this webinar, 5 signs you may be outgrowing your MySQL Data Warehouse. But just a quick plug there. All right, so a couple questions here. The first one's for Allison, and I know part of the answer, but I think I'm going to pose this one for you, and it says, does Vertica integrate only with MySQL, or does it also support SQL Server? So a question there around our database drivers and how we support other RDBMSs.
Yeah, as both CC Bill did and the example Estuate gave, customers are usually migrating from an existing database to Vertica, and customers migrate from all sorts of databases. We've had customers come from MySQL, Postgres, Oracle, SQL Server, and even a lot of the newer appliance-type databases like Netezza and others. So absolutely, we have had quite a lot of customers migrate from Microsoft SQL Server, and all of the SSAS, SSIS, all of their BI and ETL tools work with Vertica as well.
Perfect. Thanks, Allison. Okay, Jason, I got a question for you. The question is, how big is your data and how many nodes are you using? If you could just...
Sure. We have about 3 terabytes of data so far in production, and we have 2 clusters that we're using right now in production, an active and a standby cluster, and each of those have 5 nodes. They're pretty beefy servers, lots of RAM, lots of cores, but they're only 5, and they're very performant at this point. And obviously, we're also using K+2 configuration, which is it's a fail-safe configuration, which means that we can lose 2 of those boxes in one cluster, and the cluster will continue to work. And I wanted to also mention one thing about my recommendation for the 2 clusters in production. Because I know that some companies are going to have a hard time justifying that cost. And one of the things that we do in that case is we can use that secondary cluster for QA or internal query operations, so that there's a lot of value to actually having those 2 clusters in production at all times.
Great. Thanks, Jason. Okay. Got another one here for you, Allison. It says, how does Vertica perform with respect to concurrency, where a large number of concurrent users are accessing the database at the same time?
Yeah, it typically does very well. Vertica's got a bunch of case studies with customers who have up to hundreds of active queries at a time or thousands of users. We've got a pretty robust resource manager. So, out of the box, it will manage different query types pretty well. But if you also want to set up configurations and allocate subsets of resources for, maybe an interactive dashboard workload that you have, and another set of resources for, maybe analysts who are doing deeper, more exploratory analysis, you can do that. And actually, some of the wins that we have had have been specifically customers who couldn't get the throughput that they needed. And so sometimes it's, because Vertica is able to handle a lot of active queries at the same time really well, but also a lot of it's just getting, queries through a lot faster. So, if queries are taking a couple of minutes in an existing system, you're going to have a lot more of them running at the same time than if you're getting queries through a couple seconds in Vertica. The overall throughput's going to be a lot better.
Great. Thanks, Allison. One more that just came in, Allison, for you. What is the recommended RAM size? If you can talk a little bit about RAM.
Yeah, it depends a lot on the data size and the query requirements, the concurrency requirements. Vertica does publish a reference architecture, which I think Jeff mentioned earlier, which is on HP's DL380 Gen 8 servers. And that's pretty beefy. I think those are 2 8-core CPUs and maybe 128 gigabytes of RAM. That system's really designed for optimal performance, but depending on the data size and the query workloads, anywhere from 32 gigabytes of RAM up to 144 per server, I would say is pretty typical.
Great. Thanks, Allison. Okay, Roger, we've got one that came in here around some of your Estuate services. What's the typical range of this time frame here? I think they mean, how many days do you typically engage with someone on some of these migration services? What's the typical time frame?
It really depends on the size of the migration. As I said, we have a very agile implementation approach, and what I mean by that is that whatever we do it in small chunks, so that there's continual visibility into the results that we're achieving. So if we were to engage with a client around a migration, we would first do an assessment, a short assessment, and that could take maybe a couple of days, just to come up with a project plan with gates for each phase of that project plan and what results they would achieve over time. But as I said, the case study that I went through on a continuum from simple to complex, it's outside the continuum. It's very complex. So typically we would be looking at migrations that take maybe a couple of weeks.
Great, Roger. Thank you very much. Okay, guys, I think we're coming up on the top of the hour here. I just want to remind everyone that this recording will be made available early next week. We'll get that out to everyone. But I want to thank all of our presenters here for giving a great presentation, lots of great content, and particularly everyone online who joined us. Keep an eye out for other webcasts. We will be having them every month. In fact, the next one that we're planning to do next month is around sports analytics. So for all you March Madness fans out there, you won't want to miss that upcoming webcast. So thanks again for everyone for joining, and keep an eye out for future announcements. Thanks, everyone.